Hello friends, this is Dinesh and I want to talk about a critical aspect of any sustainable data analysis project no one wants to talk about. Now think of this. Whenever you talk about a data science project, what comes into your mind? Python and R code or maybe SQL query to fetch the right data, test and train data. Some people reach a bit deeper and say that okay, I want to understand the domain, the business. I want to understand what the client is exactly trying to say, to understand what he needs. Some people even go deeper to say, okay, the client is saying that this is what he needs, but why does he need that? What is the exact business problem behind that? And all of these things are important. But for making a sustainable project, you need something else. And before you ask, uh, coming to that, I'd like to ask you a question. What kind of a business do you want to build? A project do you want to build? Something which is 10 on 10 for the first time, or something which is 9.5 on 10 but consistently project over project, month over month, years over years. And so if you want to be consistently good, reasonably good over a period of time, your approach towards any project will drastically change. You are not just focused on creating something really good in the very first time, you are also focused on the process through which it is created. And so you try to implement the right processes to make sure that no matter who is working on the project, the process takes care of things. Of course, things like data analysis and any intellectual task in the 21st century will always be people dependent in a way, because the way two people will work will always be drastically different. But it should not be a case that someone worked on a project for say 6 months, 8 months, or maybe 1 year, and the next employee comes and he needs 5 days or like a month to just understand what the previous person did. And that's where the process comes in. And that's when I say the most critical aspect of a data analysis project is documentation. And everyone's talking about machine learning and Python and this and that, but no one is talking about this. Why? Because it's boring. You ask someone to do, okay, you have to write a Python script for creating a sentiment analysis, and you have to fetch some data through a SQL query, and everyone wants to do that. But you ask someone to create a 10-page document regarding what happened in the project, what's the file path, and explain those things and create just for documentation, for internal documentation, not providing it to the stakeholder. And he's like, nah, who wants to do that? Right? And so people consider this boring. And so this does not gain enough traction. But again, the question, do you want to build something which lasts, which consistently performs? And so if you want to ensure that the process, like the business is continuously performing, you may need to ensure that it's process oriented. I mean, otherwise the stakeholder would have hired a freelancer. Why an employee? Why a data analysis providing service company? Because they want to ensure that if we created a dashboard today, 6 months down the line, we want to change it. So if we have hired a data analysis company, they'll ensure that there's documentation, and if that person has left, there will be someone else to replace. He'll understand what happened previously and make changes. But if the other person is not understand to make, like, competent enough to make changes, we would have better hired a freelancer. At least it would be cheaper. And so when a company is hiring a data analyst in an in-house team, or maybe hiring a data service provider, we should be ensuring that it is process oriented, so that if one, like, the average duration of an employee is now not even 2 years maybe. I'm not saying this based on data, but just from my experience. And so we should be ensuring that no matter what happens, people are getting consistent service. And so I would like to create a list which mentions basic things about documentation, the 5 criteria which should be always kept in mind no matter what the project is. The first thing is accessibility. So, say for instance, you created a dashboard. 6 months down the line, your project manager wants to have a look at its SQL script, and they have no idea. So now they go to the path and they cannot find the SQL script. Why? Because the script lies in your personal documents, which should not be the case, because whoever is working on the project should have access to everything that is concerning the project. So whatever uh, documents pertain to that particular project should always be saved in a shared drive, which is accessible to everyone who is working on that particular project. Second thing, the file paths should be crystal clear. So again, the same example, if your manager wants to find out that SQL script, he or she should be able to easily navigate through the file paths. Because what happens is that we have folder in folder in folder, and sometimes it becomes quite long and people cannot understand where to go, how to go, because it's confusing. So they should be crystal clear. Third thing, only the final versions of documents should be placed in the concerning folders. So suppose that uh, a manager goes to find the SQL script and she finds table load script 1, table load script 2. Why is table load script 1 in the first place kept in that folder? Because that's not the final document, right? So ideally, there should be a concept of a working folder and a final folder. So only the final documents should be kept in the final folder so that anyone who wants to just reach the final thing, they can easily navigate there. Then the file names should also be clear. So suppose in this case, there are two scripts, table load query, table load script. Now, which one do you consider? Because they both seem similar. So now maybe we'll have to look at the last modified date or open the SQL query to check which query contains my need. And so the file names should be clear enough to the third person that they don't have to do any other exploratory analysis to understand what is the content. Finally, most important thing, like last but the most important, comments. Because most probably everyone will be able to reach the file path and everything. But comments is the most important part. So suppose you work on that dashboard and SQL script, and a third person is coming and looking at the script. Believe, like I'm sure you relate with me, and I found this a lot of times. Reading someone else's script is way more difficult than creating on my own. So if I can create something in 3 hours, I'll take 5 6 hours to understand someone else's script, especially when it's too long. And so that should not be the feeling the other person has. And I have done what I do as a best practice when I am creating SQL scripts. I always outline a map at the top. Say for instance, I am fetching 3 years customer data into a table. So I'll write fetching 2019-2021 data in the customers data in the customers table through a union query. So step 1, create a union query for 3 years customers data. Step 2, load each of them into a temp table. Step 3, create a final physical table for combining these three temp tables. So now the person who's opening the script in the very first place has a very clear understanding that this is how the query will go. And believe me, this 2 or 3 minutes invested in writing this will make that person's work very easy because he has now a roadmap of what is actually happening in the query. Right? So the 5 things which we discussed were accessibility, that is, the folders should be accessible to everyone who is working on that project. The file paths should be clear. Only the final versions should be hosted in the right folder. The file name should be clear. Finally, there should be detailed commits. And so if we could just keep these simple things in mind, they don't take a lot of time. Maybe just 1, 2, or 3% of the entire time you use to create the SQL script and the dashboard or the PPT or whatever it is. But this 1 or 2% invested will significantly ease a third person's understanding process. And forget a third person, even after 6 months, if you look at your own queries, you might not be able to understand because, like, I forget and I've seen many people forgetting it. So it will generally ease everyone's task, and therefore it will ultimately uh, help us in creating more sustainable projects. Um, Thank you, and please let me know if you have any suggestions or views on this.